Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then, you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, I feel like I've been having a lot more connection with my listeners through the Q&As and polls. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Hi, I'm Father Daniel Duplantis. In the 20th century, a new movement from the Far East captured the Western mind. Since then, the intersection of Christianity and martial arts has generated both conflict and harmony. In between, there remains many gray areas. In my new book, Jesus in the Dojo, I combine timeless theology with modern catechesis to provide a clearer path of reconciliation between the Christian faith and the practice of martial arts. You can find my book, Jesus in the Dojo, available now at most booksellers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to A Catholic's Perspective, the podcast all about being a young Catholic surviving in a secular world. Today, I have two very special guests with me, the Catholic couple, Bobby and Katie Fredrickson. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Amber.
Absolutely. I'm really excited for our topic today. Today, we're talking about being a disciple for Christ. And I think this is a topic that we need to talk more about, especially for the younger generation. I think it's something that we need to kind of introduce to them and be like, hey, this is how you can follow Christ. This is what it might look like. This is what it might mean for your life. So I'm very excited for our topic today.
Yeah, definitely. I think too, a lot of it's like we hear that word so many times that it's just like a buzzword. Mm-hmm. It's like, but no one ever stops to actually explain what that looks like practically, how we can become one and how can we grow doing it. So I think it's definitely something to unpack.
It does look different in every generation too.
So true. And I remember seeing like the word disciple and I was just like, oh, I'm so used to that word. I know what that means. But then when you actually think about it, it's like, do I actually know what that means?
Right.
You know, and that's something. So from your guys' experience, like what does it look like and what does it mean to be a disciple of Christ?
Well, for me, when I first heard that word, I was like, I'm a convert. So I was at the Amazing Pairs conference, maybe like 14, 15 years ago. And I heard a speaker talking about the difference between a fan and a follower. I was like a fan. I was like, I really like Jesus. I really like his teachings. But a follower is somebody who gets into the game. A fan is just somebody who's on the sidelines, just cheering it on. But being a disciple is actually getting at the feet of Jesus. That's what disciples did. They'd sit at the feet of their teacher and learn from him directly.
Right. So think of the word in it, discipline, right? But like it's taking on the disciplines of Jesus, right? Like learning from him as a model, but taking on the disciplines that he had or want for us. You know, it's giving a guide to life, right?
Seeing the world the way that he sees it through his lens. Yeah.
Right. It's action. It's action. It's not passive, like you said.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I definitely think a lot of the times we kind of get into our own little world and we're like, oh, it's so hard to be publicly Catholic. You know, it's so hard to be publicly a disciple for Christ. You know, oh, it's so easy to be a follower of Christ by myself in my room. But to go out in the world and to be like, oh, you know, I am a strong disciple of Christ and I'm going to bring people to him, that can be very difficult. I think there's so many different stories I've heard of people, you know, struggling with that. What are your guys' own stories when it comes to being disciples of Christ?
I think that takes reflective action. Like living in the moment is hard. Yeah. And I think that when you reflect on, like I was just at a birthday party and there were, I'd say some fallen away Catholics there, you know, just hear like the little comments, you know, and I think I said some positive things, but I left that party going, you know, I could have said this better in this moment. Like I probably could have expounded, but it's not, I mean, I guess you have to pick your battles, but I think that we're always that walking billboard. If the people in our lives know that we're, the practicing Catholic, that maybe we do need to shed that light and that the truth in places when it is uncomfortable.
Yeah, and for me, discipleship, a lot of it has to do with, I heard a good definition was a disciple is someone who's willing to change their schedule to get closer to Jesus.
Mm.
And for me, I was a convert. I became Catholic 15 years ago. So I grew up with all the customs and the traditions. So I got really engulfed in learning and reading and studying. And I was doing all the, changing my schedule to try to learn and to do it. And eventually led me to like daily mass. Like for me, the sacraments were the most important thing to kind of get into that. But as I grew, I just kind of got too isolated and too much about me as a disciple. And then I heard the second part of the definition is that I wanted to be someone who's willing to change their schedule to help someone else get to Jesus. That's like a missionary disciple.
Mm-hmm.
So because a lot of times too,
you got to start on yourself first.
That was my journey.
You can't give what you don't have.
Yeah.
So if you have, and it's a constant cultivation of faith. It's never just a one and done. Well, got it. Okay. And I'm going to go share it. It's a constant.
Yes. An ongoing conversion.
Ongoing conversion of yourself. And that's the thing, though. Just because you're not there yet doesn't mean you can't invite other people on your journey with you. So it's like if you're working on certain things in your faith, you can have those conversations with people. And that's actually where fruit is, because it's vulnerability and it's being real and it's it's raw and it's authentic and it's sharing that. I taught theology to freshmen at a local high school, and when you're real with them and you share your own personal struggles and the questions that you have, and allow them to ask questions and not just this is what we teach and this, and that's it. It's just more things that inviting them in
and walking with them.
Right. And walking with them and letting them know I don't have it all figured out either. Yeah. So, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I think that's something this generation needs to know, because I think there's so much pressure put on the younger generation. I mean, there's pressure put on every generation, but especially now with the increase of technology, with school, with, finding jobs nowadays, there's so much pressure on the younger generation that, when they hear about religion, it just feels like another pressure, something that they now have to also do. And, being able to, right.
That strive for perfection and everything, because you see everybody's highlight reel, right? We don't see the areas of growth and weakness where somebody overcame. It's just always their perfection we see. So these kids think they have to be perfect. And if they're not perfect, they don't want to try it. So yeah, if a religion expects me to be perfect, I don't need another thing to make demands on me.
Exactly. And I think that's what we're seeing these days. And it's so sad because it's like, no, like with the rise of social media, you're right. Everybody puts their best face forward, and sometimes their best face isn't their best face. It's actually fake. It's not real. Some people will be like, oh yeah, I just went for a run this morning and I had like the best breakfast and everything. And then like maybe from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. they had the best day ever, but then from 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. they're binging like Sister Wives or something on the couch. Do not suggest watching that show. But, right. No. But you know what I mean? And so, yeah, this whole thing with social media these days can really take up a lot of energy, I think, in the younger generation. So when they're, not bombarded, but when they discover like this religion thing, they kind of turn away from it because they're expected to be perfect, like you said. And I don't think that's the case at all when they actually learn about it and realize it's actually freeing. But in the moment, I can understand where they would get that idea, Yeah.
And I think you guys both hit on it, is that what the young people are looking for is authenticity, is that because they can read through that, see through it, that because, we have 2 children and we could tell them about the faith all they want, but if we're not living it,
right,
they're not going to take it seriously. If I'm not going to mass, they're going to know like, well, if dad doesn't think it's important, why should I? We always say more is caught than taught. Yeah. Because it is. And then when you can genuinely, when you're a disciple of Christ, you take on that, and it's hard, but that's the best part about Catholicism, was when you fall.
Yeah.
Then you repent.
When you fall, like that.
But be honest about
look at us, we're imperfect people, like to our kids, we make mistakes too. And look at how we grow from that. Like, again, like kind of having that growth mindset and seeing, that it's okay to not be perfect, and that we're striving to be better. We're striving to be saints, but and that's here's another thing too. I'm a cradle Catholic and he's the convert. And I grew up, I had to, it's like the checklist, the box checker, like I have to do this A, B, and C because I was told I had to, right? And he comes in and wants to like read all the books and do all the things. And I grew up with saint stories, and to me they made it so boring. And so now reading these lives, you're like, these people were amazing, and so to package it in that, not just that they're sitting there like, oh, all the time, that saints had raw, real issues and overcame them. Like that's how we should be packaging that, especially to youth.
Especially like Saint Joan of Arc, Saint Joseph Lisieux, like all these people, there's a reason God gave us such a diverse, list of saints, is because we're all different. And you can find a saint of your own heritage, of your own age, of your own issue, some walk like
struggles.
Yeah. Like Jesus planned for this, God planned to have different saints to fit our different needs and to have as our patron saints. And I think a lot of people, especially cradle Catholics. I'm also a cradle Catholic. My fiance is a convert. So I totally get the dynamic. And, when I was picking out my confirmation saint, I was like, I don't know, just whatever. I don't care. Like whatever,
Yeah, right.
But then when Max came into Catholicism, he really took a long time to figure out, okay, who do I want to be my patron saint? Who do I connect with? He really took the time because he came into the faith later.
Yeah.
And for me, I was just like, whatever, I don't care. Mm-hmm. And now, obviously, looking back, I have more respect for the patron saint I chose. And I realized my patron saint chose me. Her name's Saint Rose of Lima.
That's mine. That's
no
crazy.
Way.
Yeah, that's who I picked. But I was very superficial in 8th grade. I picked her because she was the patron saint of beauty.
I picked her because her name was Rose. I love that. What?
Yeah.
Wait, what's Bobby's patron saint?
Saint Michael.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I love that. Okay.
That's so manly, I guess. That's what I thought. I'm like, to be honest, mine was because I had a sordid past and I was the bad boy and I needed all the protection. I got St. Michael tattooed on my arm, St. Benedict medal.
We love it.
I need all the protection.
He has a full sleeve, just Catholic sleeve. His whole arm is.
Hey, I mean, a Catholic sleeve, you're protected, man. You get that blessed, and then it's like you're wearing a St. Benedict medal 24/7.
Yeah, and it's helped really spark conversations all over the place. Everyone always asks about your tattoos, and then it just gives you and if someone asks you, like, are you sure you want to ask? Because I'm going to go on a tangent here.
We have time.
Yeah.
I love that. But I mean, like you said, like those are great conversation starters. Wearing medals are great conversation starters. I've worn shirts before in public where they're like Catholic, but people are like, what does like memento mori mean? Or what does, all these things mean? And I'm like, well, let me tell you.
I also have that tattooed on my arm. So I get that a lot. I get that a lot.
Like, what does this mean?
The time is 3:00 on the.
Yeah, like what's that clock? I'm like, oh, that's 3:00. That's the time Jesus died. It helps me remember. Yeah.
Also, the hour of mercy. Like, there's so much, and I think that's so important because, like you were saying earlier, Katie, like as Catholics, we do need to live out our faith. We can't just be Catholic in the church. Once we leave church, we also have to still practice our faith. And if we are like, I forget the term, but like basically the Gerber baby, because we are Catholics, we're supposed to be sharing our faith out there. It's like, we have to wear these things. And I think it's definitely one thing if we're asked about stuff, right? Like you guys are asked about stuff, you're asked about your tattoos and everything like that. And that's great conversation starter. But then I was in Colorado recently, and while we were walking through Pearl Street, which is this very popular street in Colorado, in Boulder, Colorado, there was a homeless man with one sock on and one sock off, but he was like screaming the gospel at the top of his lungs. And I was just like, that's okay, maybe not the route I would have taken. But at the same time, I'm like, are we screaming the gospel at the top of our lungs with what we do in our actions and like how we're living our lives? Or are we like whispering it? And I mean, I'm a quiet person in general. I don't like to stir up controversy or cause issues. But I definitely think being a disciple of Christ, that's going to happen no matter what.
Yeah, that was one thing Jesus definitely said was going to happen, is that you're going to get into some trouble. And what was it? G.K. Chesterton said that the mark of a disciple, you're going to be unbelievably happy and you're going to be in constant trouble. That's just what's going to happen, because we're supposed to challenge that status quo. For me, I used to get ridiculed at work because I would be reading the Bible, and I was almost fired from my job because of my religion. And then I started going to daily mass, and then fast forward like 3 years later, I'm leading prayer at work. It's just so funny, like how God, when you're faithful and you do these things kind of flip themselves around. And
Takes trust. Though.
Yeah, they would try to tease me and say Bobby Jesus. They would call me Bobby Jesus like it was an insult. I'm like, you're putting my name with Jesus's name. I just bow my head and show reverence. And then, but on the flip side of the discipleship, when you're not perfect, they're quick. Other people are really quick to call you out, like, oh, I thought you go to church. I thought you're this. I said, well, I do, but I don't think you understand the way that we as Catholics see the church. The church is a hospital for go, not because I think I have it all together, is because I know I don't and God does. And he has his life giving blood in the Eucharist, in the sacraments. I go there for him to fill me up, to empty out myself. I don't go because I think I'm a saint. I go because I know I'm a sinner. And that's right. When you say that to other people, and because that's true. I know, like I said, I have a sordid past, and I'm constantly have to check myself because I have so many built habits. It took me 15 years building them in. So that's why I think what Katie was talking about with discipleship, it does require discipline, because it's really easy in this world to, it's just like a diet. It's like you fall off over the weekend, you have a bunch of cheat meals on the weekend, and then Monday comes, it's like you don't feel like getting back into whether that's you missed the gym or you're not eating right. And then Monday comes, it's really hard to just turn it off and turn it right back on. That's why I think God's plan was perfect. The one day off, it doesn't give you 2 days to get back in there. That having Sundays is the rest and Sabbath instead of 2 days, it's really hard to get back in. And that's the same with our faith journey. It's just, for me, I just started adding like an extra mass in the week, and because and then I started, not just once the discipline got built in, then it's like you grow in that love that you want to be there. But I think first that comes first, that discipline that you have to build in, these routines and these habits, because I know I'm a creature of habit. Mm-hmm. And then once I build those in, then it's just like, you don't have to, you get to, and then you start to grow in that relationship. I think, for me, at first, when I first started, it was so much of that fear-based, but it's a balance of, I had to purge, like St. John of the Cross talks about the purgative way, the illuminative way, and the unitive way. And as a convert, I had to purge a lot. I had to get a lot of these bad habits out and create these boundaries and these guardrails to from, going back to hang out with this guy, or to go put myself in these situations where I know I would go sin, and setting that up. But once I finally got that down, and then I started reading scripture, when I started taking my faith seriously, getting involved in small groups, serving, doing those kinds of things, then I started to fall more in love, because I had a lot of the bad habits, to the curb. And then I had a chance to actually, where I can start to cultivate the relationship and the love with Jesus.
It sounds so counterintuitive, but actually discipline and boundaries and routine, things like that actually give you more freedom as you, like learning how to play a game. When you learn how to do the fundamentals, then you actually are more free to play the game and experiment with different, moves and things like that but you have to start somewhere. You have to have that foundation. Yeah. And that has to begin in a specific discipline.
Right. And I think also with that discipline and stuff, it, like you said, it frees us up to be able to do things more fully and actually have fun with them, and, learn how to appreciate the gifts God's given us. But then when we learn, the fundamentals of things, and I guess people would say the rules of the church are very like strict and rigid and things. And I'm like, no, actually, it gives us more freedom. It gives us a space to feel safe in, because then we know what's off limits and what's not. And we know what's pleasing to God and what's not.
Yeah. So for me coming in, it did seem like a lot of rules, and I needed them, I think, like, because there was a story that we were talking about with G.K. Chesterton, where that if there aren't those boundaries, that the people don't know how far they can go. And if by you having those boundaries, they're willing, they're safe. They feel safe to go to the edge, but they know not to go over.
Right. So likened it to a cliff. So if there was this cliff and there was no fence, then you'd stay really far behind the cliff. Like, it's very daunting. But if there's a fence, you can go up to the fence. You have that safety guardrail, right? and you could
Mm.
even hang over the fence even,
Yeah,
but you know
that's
your
me. I
boundary.
get real
You know,
close to the fence and
this
hang
is
over.
this is it, but this is my, so it's a little, you could look over the edge, you could you know, but you're not cowering in fear, right? You're not
Right.
paralyzed by fear.
Well, I think too, where I understood it a lot better too is when in Exodus that Moses, they didn't get the 10 commandments until after God had the relationship first. So when you don't have a relationship with God and it's just, if it's just rules
Just makes no
first,
sense.
then there's no one, because you don't love the person. It's like, yeah, I'm married. It's not
But
rules.
all
It's
relationships
not
have
rules. Yeah,
rules.
but it's not like I don't feel like, oh, I have to
I
stay
mean, like,
faithful. I have to do these
just
things.
think of friendship. Like, friendships have some kind of like, there's rules in friendship. Like, don't tell my secrets to people, right? Like, don't backstab me. Hang out with me. Make me laugh. Do, like, there are rules in everything. Like, if in relationships, you're not like stopping my good time by telling me I can't date other guys. Like, that's
Right.
part of the relationship, is we're exclusive with
But-
each other.
But without the relationship, the rules can seem like they're imposed for
Right.
no reason at all. But then, just like with raising our children, it's like, well, if we just say, just do this because I said so, you're not going to get the attitude.
Sometimes we have to.
Sometimes you obviously have to, but for the most time that,
No, but explaining, when you explain, sometimes they're pretty logical, like, for the most part.
Right.
And they'll just say, we say, well, what if I didn't say this? Oh, that makes sense.
Right.
Most of them.
I know, but that can be really difficult at times too, because sometimes you don't always notice how to answer, like you don't always know how to answer their question either. Sometimes it's like, oh, let me get back to you on that. Because they'll be like, why? Why do I have to do this? And it's like, I don't know. I ran into that situation too while babysitting quite a few times.
Yeah. And well, but I think they appreciate that. If you say, I don't know, but you got to get back to them, because if you don't get back to them, they're going to be like, oh, they're just making this up, or they just won't take you seriously.
Well, like I said, when I taught theology, students would ask me some really tough questions, and I would say, I'm not, I don't have a master's in like dogmatic, I can look,
Theology.
like, I might not know the answer, but where to find it. So when
Right.
they ask things, I would know where to find it. A lot of things we're always asking about, like pets making to heaven, which was interesting. That one that I found. So then as I kept teaching, there were so many questions I knew the answers to, because I had to look it up because of what I was asked. So it's
Right.
good. Questioning things is good. Like asking questions is a good thing. It means that you're on a quest for truth. And,
Right.
and honestly, no matter what our secular culture is trying to tell us, right, about relativism and truth is your truth. When you hear the truth, it does hit different, right? Like we're wired for the truth.
And I think it was Ernest Hemingway said that the truth has a ring to it. It's just, I mean, when you hear it, and then if you're running from that, there's usually some other reason why, that there's something that you're from or hiding from.
Not ready for
it. Don't want to accept it. Doesn't make it any less
true. But also, as disciples, we can't be hammering people over the head, right? We need to approach things with love and charity, and frame things in a way that comes from a place of love. Anytime I taught really hot button issues, I would always frame it under, like inherent dignity of the person. And so they really, when they understood why the church taught what she teaches on specific moral issues, they understood the why. Even I had students say, I still don't agree, but now I get it. Because though it's not hate, right? It's it comes from a place of genuine love and concern for the individual person, and that they have value and worth. And so when they understand I'm like, that's really for everything the church teaches that's controversial really does stem from that. So I think that, and how we speak it and how we deliver it is really a lot too.
Yeah.
Which takes practice.
Yeah, truth and love. It's a learn. You have to either have to learn how to do it, and you have to also, for me, a lot of times, and I know it's really hard, but I think this is the heart of what discipleship is intentionality. So if I know I'm going to have a tough question, or I'm getting these conversations, I'll pause and say, Holy Spirit, come help me be with this, because I don't know what to say to this person. I don't want to offend them. I don't want to come off too know-it-all-y. I don't want to come off as pharisaical. I don't want to act like, I want to be just right. I want to draw them closer to Jesus. And sometimes they're just going to turn away. I can't handle that, but I can definitely try to have God, call God's presence and try to invite him in. And I think that's just part of being disciple, is being intentional.
In the
Yeah.
right time, though. There's a time and a place. Like, so me at
Yeah.
that birthday party, I'm not going to sit there and explain like what the church teaches on marriage at the
Right.
birthday party. I'm just going to kind of keep my mouth closed and just say my personal experience with the specific priest. You know, someone's complaining about a priest and divorce, you know, things like that about the church. And I was like, well, I just know my experience with him. He was a good priest. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I can't, I'm not going to go in there and say, well, actually, do you know why the church teaches that? And Jesus said, I'm not going to, you know, there's a time and a place.
Well,
Right.
I think there's levels to it
And
too.
knowing
It's like,
when.
yeah, that's it goes to the rules and explaining those things to them. You have to have that relationship. Are they, you know, Sherry Waddell wrote a great book about forming intentional disciples. There's stages. There's, you know, where they're curious. Are they truth seeking? Are they ready? Like, do you have to, you know, to be in different
They need to
spots?
feel heard and trust you, or
Yes.
else how can you accompany them anywhere? I mean, then you're
Right.
just somebody barking.
Yeah, especially with this younger
Orders, right.
generation. So many different studies have come out about that. That's what they want. They want to be heard. Not that what you're saying, and to them, it's not even what you're saying back, but that you recognize, you take the time to hear out what they're
Mhm.
asking and say, okay, I see where you're coming from, and then say it back. If you just listen to them, they're way more open and receptive to that. But if we just start with, well, because the Bible said so, or
Mhm.
those kinds of things, they're not going to be very receptive. It's like, yes, give them space to ask questions and find those opportunities to step into that when they're, you know, when people are curious, or especially, you know, times of death or loss, or that's when,
Yeah.
you know, that's when it's really easy, because people, you know, what they say is the hardest time to be an atheist is when there's something to be thankful for and there's no one to thank.
Right.
Or the
Mhm.
time when someone dies and everyone just goes to heaven, they think. So it's
Right.
like those
If you're an
opportunities.
atheist,
There's
you don't go anywhere.
that's
Oh, yeah. You
that's
cease
the
to exist.
Yeah. You just poof.
But for me, for our journey, it's been a lot of help with having each other, being the Catholic couple, and growing it. And I don't think I would be able to grow as a disciple. It's hard to do it by yourself.
Mhm.
Mm.
So for
You need a
us, we have
community.
each other, but that still wasn't enough. So we sought out a community
Mhm.
of
Right.
people to help share it with. And that's when I really
We
started to
have
grow
very
in our
similar
faith.
struggles and issues, and we were able to talk again, be genuine and raw with each other, and not have to put on a show like, oh, we have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And we're faithful, you know, people have
Right.
to
I
be.
think it's more authentic when you're not perfect, because people are, you know, they can relate. And that's something I've definitely learned being a Catholic communicator, being online on social media, doing these talks, is when people come up to me, they're like, I went through this exact same experience, or I went through this exact same feeling. And I'm just like, dude, no way, me too. And so
Mhm.
there's a connection that's formed there. And I think there's a lot that can be said, opposed to somebody like trying to share their heart about a situation, no matter how bad it might be. Maybe they struggle with same-sex attraction. And instead of us going like, well, you know what the church says about that, and you know, we're
Right.
like, you know, it's more like, oh, well, tell me more about that. Like, maybe there's something in there that we can find common ground on. And I
Mhm.
think just like we're taught in the pro-life, I call it pro-life school, but when we're taught pro-life counseling and like sidewalk counseling, they tell us to find common ground with the people, because
Yeah.
that's how you form a connection in a very short amount of time, as you try to agree with them on something and gain that level of you know, friendship with them, even though it's a very small, if they can trust you because you guys can agree on something,
Mhm.
and you're like, but this is my view. And then sometimes, a lot of the times, if they say their view to you and you repeat it back to them but using different language, they're going to be like, oh, well, I don't actually believe that, you know.
Yeah.
So there's certain things that we can definitely do to reach out to people. But how do you think being a disciple of Christ changes your life?
Well, for me, every day I look back at what I used to be like to now. It's just so radically different. But it didn't happen overnight. I've been working on it for 15
Mhm.
years. So it started with the basics, which is going to church at least every Sunday. That's the bare minimum. And
Mhm.
going to, you know, but for me, it just wasn't enough. I was falling more in love. So I was like, okay, well, I was new to it. So I'm like, I had to learn. So I started reading my Bible. I took Matthew Kelly's advice and I read the Gospels for 2 years straight, over and over again. Just read the Gospels till I knew the stories. Then I started reading the whole Bible. And then it's like, then I took classes. Then I went to the lay leadership program at Mundelein. It's just a disciple is a learner. So to learn, whether you have to either, some things you have to learn through books, but like swimming, some things you can only learn by getting in the water, so, we were moved by that first conference that we went to 14 years ago, that we were moved to want to go make disciples. Is that we were in a parish was mostly older people, and it was us. And it's like, we didn't want to be alone. So we're like, we need to find other people to do church with, because it was kind of lonely. Like, we don't have much in common. We had groups and stuff, but it wasn't the same. So we were really looking for other people. So a disciple is somebody who's a lifelong learner who, Matthew 28 says, go make disciples. So you can't make disciples if you're not a disciple yourself, but it's a lot easier to be a disciple with other disciples. So we started and looked for a community of other people who were taking their faith seriously. And we found a parish through they had a perpetual adoration chapel. That's what drew us to the parish. And it's like, okay, this is cool. We love adoration. We were doing it, once, they'd have it once a week for like a couple hours. I'm like, there's 24/7. There's someone always in here praying. They have a whole just on this. I'm like, the fruit coming from this place is you can feel it. I'm like, we want to be part of something like that, where people are taking their faith seriously and holding themselves accountable, but not just for themselves, but for others, for serving and trying to help other people. So we got really involved. Katie, she took a position as a principal at the school. So now she has a totally different role of making disciples. She has, over 400 kids. So she's the leader of the school and to help the teachers. So she's trying to do the best she can with that. And with me, I lead a men's group that we do like workouts in the morning, and then we go to mass, we go to confession, and then we kind of just hang out. And then we started a small group that we have about 20.
We call it Catholic House Party.
It's Catholic House Party. Yeah, it's awesome. So we just have a meal and fellowship, and then someone gives a talk, and then we have small groups. But we all have kids, so we bring babysitters because it's like we're busy. We got kids. Everyone's our age. Late 20s to 50s, in that range. But it's just doing church together. But it doesn't necessarily, doesn't always look like, well, you're serving the poor or your street evangelization, but sharing our lives together. Like, hey, we're going to have fellowship. We're going to pray before the meal. Someone's going to give a talk about their faith journey. And then we're going to have small group questions. Then we're going to pray, and we're going to sing and pray. And like, it's normal. And our kids are going to see us doing it. And we're going to live the faith, not just, isolated. For me, that's what I felt like for the first 5-6 years of my faith. It was just me.
But that needs to happen. You need to have that solitary moment. That you
but
and
that's the start.
Cultivating that.
But a discipleship is it's both and. That's the best part about Catholicism. It's the vertical with you and God, but it's also with you and everybody else. And it's a lot easier to be a disciple when, Jesus had the 12, so it's like, can you imagine if it was just the 3, they would have probably been hammering it out, but the 12, it's a band of brothers. It's a group. So it's a lot easier to do that, because you're going to fall. You're going to have issues. You're going to have loss of a job. You're going to have spouse get sick, kids get sick. Things are going to happen. And that having people to be the church with, it just makes it all that much better, and having support and people who share the same stuff as you.
One of the members of our group, his dad is in his 70s and has been in a small group since, oh my gosh, how many years?
50 years.
50 years. They've been in a small group together, and now they're in their 70s and losing members.
Wow.
Spouses, but they've been always together and meeting on a regular basis in that small group. It's so cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's what for us helped our faith come alive, is that being not only just on our podcast and the videos and stuff we do, which we started during COVID because we had all these conversations that we were kind of nerds, because that we wanted to just talk about these kinds of things.
Our family and friend circles are very secular. They really are. And I was, you were secular and I was too. I was just a cradle Catholic who was checking the boxes, like I said. And then he became this convert that started taking it seriously. I'm like, whoa, dude, I just go to church. So it changed things for me. Then it started making me take my faith seriously and dive deeper. And then when I experienced that coin drop of that head knowledge to heart knowledge, so I'm hardwired Catholic, right? So when we were at a conference, one of the speakers said that, people from that grew up Catholic, they're hardwired. They just need a switch to flip. And that happened. I'm like, oh, this is not just a bunch of rules. It's a relationship. And wow, this is like, it just changed my life. And I just think about the family and friends who grew up the same way. I just want that switch so bad for them. It's so hard though with the people in your circle, and that you grew up with, that knew you before, right? That knew you before you started to take your faith seriously. And there's still people that I love dearly. It's just so difficult because the conversations and the deep connection that I yearn for, I can't have with them. They're not there. So having that group really does help fuel us to have the conversations and go deep and be genuine and authentic and topics that you wouldn't be able to have with anyone else.
Right.
Yeah,
No, it completely makes sense.
And you get to share it. It's just like I was a teacher. She was a teacher, now a principal. But the more when you teach things and you share them, you know them better. It's like that's just how it works. It's just crazy how that works. And when we find out that discipleship is about giving yourself away, that's what it's about. It's about, when you figure out that this life's not about you, that it's meant to be shared, you're meant to love and sacrifice and those things. That's when you grow in discipleship. And it's like, the crosses are going to come. That's guaranteed, but when you got other people to help you on the journey, to support you, to pray with you, to go to Bible studies together with, to pray together, to be part of a group, it just makes it so much easier.
Right. No, that's so true. And I love this conversation because it's so fun. And I know we can talk about this forever because I love your guys' experience. And I definitely think a lot of people are going to relate to it. Coming over to like our final question is, what would you guys say to someone who hears the call to be a disciple, but might be too afraid to act on it? Because we do need to act on it, right? Like we established earlier, it can't just be our own solitude, selves.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's afraid?
I think that Catholic media today is so awesome. There's so much to learn from, choose from. I think that's what, to me, got my feet wet, was just listening to good podcasts, reading good books, listening to like Father Mike Schmidt's homilies, right? Like little things like that would, I want to see, like, how do I take this seriously? Like, I want to inform you. You really do have to inform yourself, right? Honestly, I would say sitting in adoration. I think
That's
adoration is the most powerful place. I think that, I forget who he was. He's funny on Instagram. One of the cool Catholic people on Instagram, right? There's so many now. And he said, don't take somebody's interested in the faith. Don't take them to mass. Take them to adoration.
Oh, yeah. The Grassroots Catholic.
Grassroots Catholic.
Yeah, I'm friends with him. He's great. He's really funny.
Yeah. And it's so, as soon as I said, like, yes, that's so true. Can we say that? Can we say don't take somebody to mass?
Yeah, because most honestly, people aren't going to get it.
That is the most powerful, life-changing place to go to. It's like a tanning bed for grace.
Well, I also feel like because the Eucharist is the pinnacle of our faith, like it's the reason we are Catholic. If there was no Eucharist, it wouldn't make sense as to why we're Catholic, really.
Yeah, right.
So why not bring somebody to help them understand the Eucharist? Otherwise, because the whole reason we have the Mass is for the Eucharist, the consecration, transubstantiation, all, worship God. And if they don't understand the importance of the Eucharist, then they're not going to understand the Mass. So it makes sense.
Right. Yeah. But even just allowing, it's kind of like surrendering to Jesus. Like, okay, I brought him here. Now it's all you. Like, there's power in what he does in adoration.
And not so much pressure on you.
And it's not so much pressure on you. It's just like, here you go, Jesus, work on him. You got this.
Yeah. I think adoration is also good, obviously, because Jesus is there and he's the one who's going to do all the work. But it's also a place where most of the people in our lives now are on their screens all day, or they're with noise. There's not too many places where people can go with the library or a church.
Yeah.
Those are the only places you can get real good silence. And we know, all throughout the scriptures and Psalms or Elijah's, that God's there, not in the lightning, not in the earthquake, but in that small, still voice, especially people who are not, they're seeking, they're trying to be a disciple, they've maybe had an encounter and they want to go deeper in their faith. And a lot of it is asking God, well, God, what do you want me to do? That's what I started doing. I wrote that on my Bible. God, what do you want me to do, to remind myself? Because the more I try to do what I want to do, I'm falling. I'm an idiot. I do stupid things. But if I stop and am I intentional and I love that little book by Brother Lawrence, Practicing the Presence of God, because that's what it is. Like, you have to take that time to pause and to try to just be with God in all the moments and like, hey, what do you want me to do? And try to live it.
It also takes pressure off that person. So like, again, he's a convert. None of his brothers are practicing anything, right? He's a convert from nothing. So when we invite them to mass, that's an expectation of all the sitting and the standing and the acting right. And
It's gotta be a good homily.
There's gotta be a good homily. But when you go to adoration, that's pressure off of the person. Like, I just have to sit and listen and be calm. Okay, I could do that. I could try that.
I know how many times I've taken one of my friends to church, and I'm like, please don't let this be a controversial homily. Please don't let this be a controversial homily.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
then it's going to be a long drive back home.
Boring. Like, I hope they're, I hope they don't think this is too
Or like
weird.
when you have to tell them like, hey, you can't go up for communion. Like,
yeah. It is really good though at our parish. I love this. But I just hope that they that people like
Well,
you're just hoping that people pay attention.
Well, they say very nicely.
They say, we believe in body, that this is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. If you are not in a state of grace or practicing Catholic, please come up for a blessing. Like they make that announcement before every.
Oh, that's good. I know our church only does it for like big events or like feast days or something, but that's good that they do it during mass, because I think that's when we need it the most. Because you never know who's in your audience.
Right.
Exactly. But I have a hard time, the adoration, the whole mass thing too, because that's how I became Catholic. I went to one mass and I was so overwhelmed. I went to a midnight mass, and God's, if people are open, I think that's what a lot of it is trying to help somebody take that step. Are you going to be open to it? Because if they're open, then the Holy Spirit's going to do the work. It's nothing, that I'm going to say. The pressure shouldn't be for us that, well, I have to make them a disciple. We're called to plant seeds and to sow them all over the place. Whether like that's handing them a prayer card or praying.
You're not
for
always
them.
going to see the fruits. That's hard for me.
Right.
Or not right away, for sure.
Right. Like I taught theology for 4 years, and I went to a luncheon and a former student of mine was there, and her mom approached me later. I gave her a big hug, we were talking, and then later the mom came up to me and said, oh, she pointed you out when you walked in and said, that's why I'm still Catholic right there. She's why I'm still Catholic. I was like, oh, really? I didn't think you listened to me at all.
It's so crazy how that works. Like the people who you think are not maybe like past helping or anything, but maybe that don't feel like they don't hear you. You feel like they don't care about anything, end up being the ones who have the most, beautiful conversions.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And you're not always going to see it. So it's not about you. Like, we got to check our pride with that, right? It's so hard though, because it's not so much about pride, but as much as like, are my efforts working? Am I using the gifts and talents that God gave me the right way? Like, is this what he wants me to do? Like, if this doesn't work, is that God's way of saying, try something else? Because,
right.
So it's a tough balance when you don't.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. It's like, that's like, I was in sales before. It's like some will, some won't. Like Jesus says, if they don't listen, shake your sandals and move on. Our call is to sow seeds. It's not God does the work. He does the conversions, but we have to be the best billboards, like you said, to present the faith in a way. There wasn't a Bible in the early church. They converted people by their joy. And I think as Catholics, that's where we're lacking a lot of it, is the joy of the gospel, the joy of having that relationship that, like, oh, you have to go to church. I'm like, no, I get to go to church. I get to be with Jesus every single day. I get to receive his body, blood. I said, no, I love going to church. It's like, you don't understand the relationship part. When you get that down and how much, how much it helps me in my day doing that, like, just, I can feel the difference. It's like, but when we live it that way, it's different than like, oh, I got to go Sunday, or, it's just having a joyful attitude about it.
I think that what people see, how you deal with things, like you said, like, what we say and our actions are going to speak louder than our words. So if we handle a really difficult situation a certain way, it's attractive to some, and say, how did you handle that? That was so great. And then that gives you your opportunity to talk about your faith, that as you cultivate it, like I used to pray this all the time. I want to be so saturated with you, Lord, that when I'm squeezed, only you come out. Because when I'm squeezed, he doesn't always come out, right? Like I can lose my temper. I get in a pity party. Like, but if I'm in a situation and I handle it a certain way, like when he first converted, he was got into like, how many fights have you been into? Over 50 fights, when he was in college.
I was a bouncer, bartender.
Yeah. Well,
So it's funny. And when he first converted, there was a bar fight, of course, right? And his brother's expecting him to jump in it because that's what old Bob would have done, right?
Right.
And he was actually trying to mediate it and stop it and get in the middle. And he's like, bro, what happened to you? He's like, I told you.
Jesus happened.
I'm different.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Right.
I was like, oh gosh, we were all like sweating, like what's gonna happen?
But that's when it was the first, like it showed in front of other people in a different. But that's it. But then you start noticing like what's going on. But then my family doesn't. They don't. But like on Christmas, we've always celebrated Christmas, but we had no relationship with God. But now it's like, hey, they know you're the religious one, so hey, do you want to lead prayer? Like they'll say it. Yeah. So there are opportunities, and we don't know what's going to happen down the road, but I think it is our opportunity, our responsibility when we have those opportunities to be bold, to share the faith, because it's uncomfortable and it's weird. And most Catholics, that's evangelicals do that, or I'm not trained, or, you don't have to be trained. You don't have to have a theology. You don't have to have a theology degree to share your relationship, and no one can argue with your relationship. They can rely, they can argue with, teachings and stuff like that. But hey, I was lost. Now I'm found. I used to be a bar fighter. Now I go to daily mass. Now, I used to be angry. Now I'm joyful.
I'm a little bit angry.
I'm angry at sin.
You reorient priorities.
That's it. But
no, I love that.
But yeah, we're enjoying it. We love talking about discipleship because, like I said, it helps us always when we're talking about it, we're growing about it. We're thinking about these things that matter. What's more important? The purpose of our life is to know, love, and serve. The first part is know. Okay, as a disciple, you should start reading the Bible. You should, definitely go to confession at least once a month to have your check-in and to confess and to stay in a state of grace. Go to mass, and then
do the base.
Then you start to fall in love, and then you're filled with that love that you want to share it with other people. That's to know, love, and serve God, and then serve others. But it's a progression, because if you don't know, it's hard to love. If you don't love, then you're not going to want to serve. So it's like sometimes you got to start. If you're just new to this and you want to be a disciple, then try to get to know God better through his word, through the sacraments, through the church. And then you build that relationship. Then you're going to want to share it with other people.
That's wonderful. Wow, you guys, this is so great. I love how we packed so much into such a short, well, I guess it's been an hour. It's so crazy how fast time goes. I know. But no, I love it. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, you guys, for coming on and talking about this very important topic. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having us. We love talking about it.
Of course. Where can my listeners find you guys?
Our podcast is The Catholic Couple Podcast, and then on Instagram we're The Catholic Couple One.
We're Catholic Couple One.
Yeah, the person with Catholic, I tried buying the original, and they didn't want it.
They wouldn't want to sell it.
But we started the social media later. We started the podcast before, but we have a smaller YouTube channel. We're going to start doing more YouTube stuff. So we're The Catholic Couple on YouTube also.
Awesome.
But Instagram's probably the best spot. I'm on there a lot, posting and.
Right. And the podcast is on iTunes, Spotify. It's on all of it.
Google.
So. Wonderful. Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming on. And hopefully we'll have you on again.
Anytime. Thanks, you.
Amber.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. And with all of that being said, I hope that this podcast helped anyone who is struggling in this area. Maybe you learned something new. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Amber Rose and distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright by The Religious Hippie, NFP. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions stated in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure to visit the official website for The Religious Hippie at thereligioushippie.com or find me on social media for other unique content.
A quest is a search for something. And every week, the Quest podcast will show you how we know what we know through interviews with people that have incredible stories of dedication and perseverance. I'm your host, Todd Fisher. Join me in this thought-provoking and inspiring podcast of discovery. Find us anywhere you listen to podcasts.